Hi everybody, it's Professor Diffley. This is Criminal Justice Ethics. We are in Module 7, Chapter 6. So just going to go through some of the, as usual, for what we need to do this module. You actually get 2 weeks to do this module because it's pretty long. There's a really good amount of videos. There's journals, there's going to be an exam, and the slideshow is longer than usual. The chapter's not that big, but I added a lot of stuff in here. So make sure you go through it all. Make sure to watch all these videos as well. There's some more. There's just the journal assignment and the exam is all you're going to need to do. The thing about the exam, very important on this one, it's going to be different. And from this point out, now we're around in the courses, we're now starting to apply the stuff we've learned towards this. So this exam is going to have written parts to it, essentially scenarios, and I actually give you an example of what it's going to be, have you work on it in the journals to start answering these. These are pretty straightforward one-sentence ones. You'll have a couple like this, but you'll also increasingly going forward on these for all the next chapters we're going to do, including the final. They're going to get even longer. So maybe I'll give you here, these are more or less one issue ethical scenarios as we go forward and expected on the exam, where you'll have longer scenarios. Stories would have multiple factors and multiple issues. So get ready looking for that. How are you going to do that? You're going to look at the codes of ethics in the back of your textbooks. And there's 3 of them. The first one is the Chiefs of Police, IACP. There is Federal Bureau, FBI, core values. And then you skip a couple pages. Those are correct. We'll come back to those. The UN codes. So the UN code is broken up into different article sections, and so that's easy enough. Make sure you look at the commentary because they really explain why and the rules are what they are, and they help really clarify them. What I would do with the police one too is, you can see it's broken. This one's more paragraphs, and so is the FBI. You're going to have to cite, you're going to have to be able to quote to these, say which code of ethics. So for the journals and on the exams, cite to all the codes that apply, not just one of them, all 3. So the FBI, the IACP, Chiefs of Police, and the UN code of ethics for this. And we're going to be using these codes as we go forward. So let's get into the slides now. Again, this one's longer, so let's get into this. Excuse me. Yeah. So how should the law be enforced? So this covers a couple things, this chapter, and so a lot of this is review. You should have had these in classes before, 4th and 5th Amendments, stop and frisk kind of things, and then we'll go into the code stuff. But why is this important? Ethics for police. Well, police are the gatekeepers of the criminal justice system, right? Most people, if they have any contact with criminal justice in one way or the other, it is going to be with the police rather than, say, a lawyer or a judge or anything like that. It's going to be one way or the other through the police. And since these are the people that the public is going to most interact with, it's important that the perception is, well, one, it's really important that they are ethical, but also important that there's the perception of ethics. Remember, it's how people perceive things that is truly the reality. Here. Other things here. Police authority. Police also just have massive authority, intrude privacy, liberty, to arrest you, all sorts of things. So they have to. It's really important that they are ethical. More of this, public trust in the criminal justice system. If people think everybody's corrupt in it, rule of law, respect for the law is going to go away, and that will descend into chaos. Again, they're the public face. Great deal of attention then is given to these balancing act of the police's role. The police role is interest the community for maintaining order, something we want, right? That's why we give police the authority to do this for us, and we want them to apprehend crime suspects. But we also want to not be left alone and not have our rights infringed. So, given a very tough job, as you know, it's an incredibly difficult job to being a police officer in so many ways. But just trying to balancing these seemingly at times, maybe these values don't always seem to go together for people. We want them to maintain order, go after criminals, but also respect our liberties, give us our privacy, and to be left alone. It can be very, very difficult. I mean, there's all sorts of things that are problems for police to deal with in public, in society in general. It really, really is. So scope and police and its limits. Police observe behavior and must make judgments. And so it helps if they're ethical, that when they make these judgments about what's criminal, how to prevent crime, how to deal with the public. And that's one of the biggest issues for people you talk to who are officers, people who work with them, all that. Not everybody, most are really good communicators, but not everybody is. They don't know how to always talk to people, which is something you would hope is taught and learned, but it really is important as being respectful, being able to interact with people, and especially respect in the face of usually asking the officer this. It's a tough gig because think of it this way: when you deal with the public here, it's usually going to be in some of their worst times. They're not going to be happy. It's not like people just call the cops and like, "Hey, I'm happy," right? Something bad's happened in many cases, and so these people are going to be vulnerable. They're going to be upset. It's going to be a lot to manage. It's going to take psychology, understanding people, and also controlling your emotions like the stoicism. Others here be very, very difficult. But they also need to make these decisions about being stopped, frisked, guided. Now, how is that? We make those guided and limited in legal terms by the Constitution, Fourth and Fifth Amendments, and prevailing case law. And so that's what a lot of this, we're going to run through this. You've had this before. This is in the book, so read through the slides here. I'm not going to go through a lot of this, but obviously we've talked about the procedural law and stop and frisk before. This, procedural law is sets the process. So due process rights is essentially what this really helps us understand. The Bill of Rights, obviously, you know what that is. Details many of the requirements for adjudication, arrest, warrants, searches, trials, lawyers, punishment, all that sort of thing. So Fourth, Fifth Amendment, and case law. Case law is how the cases are decided, how the judges interpret the law. Fourth Amendment, right of the people to be secure in their persons, house, papers, effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Is that right? You have the right against unreasonable search seizures, which the courts have interpreted to mean you have privacy, even though privacy is never mentioned in the Constitution. Explicitly, it should not be violated, and no warrant shall issue. So one says that for them to have to search you, they need the warrant. Search your home, invade your house, that sort of thing. In most cases, obviously, there's exceptions, but upon probable cause, right? And so that is the bar that we have to meet. But it's not just enough bar. It's got to be supported by oath or affirmation, signed off by a judge, because it is a big thing to be able to go into someone's home like that. Again, what is probable cause? You have it here. You've seen this before. Know these standards here for what probable cause is. Make sure you know all that. And you can see some of the factors here and some of the situations where this happened. Just a note in my notes, the D, that would be defendant here. D is defendant, and that's just shorthand for it. Moving on. Again, you've seen this. Terry versus Ohio, the Terry stop and frisks. You've seen this in your classes before. Here's the facts, the issues, the holding. Holding, in case just terminology, is how the court decided, what they decided, and why they decided. And this creates a new standard, reasonable suspicion. And again, Terry stops are really about officer safety. There's limits. It's the difference between a frisk and a search. Frisk is over the clothing. Search is much more detailed. Again, this sets the limits, distinguishes between stop and arrest, a frisk and a search. Frisk is defined as patting down of outer clothing, whereas search is exploration for evidence. Seizure is where then you take it, a meaningful interference, and you can see some. So know these cases in these slides, and they are in the book. I added a couple cases that really have come out since the book, or have become more important as we go. You'll see that Illinois versus Wardlow. Again, this is trying to determine what and put boundaries, or really frame and help clarify what reasonable suspicion is. Here's nervous, evasive behavior, right? This is the idea of someone running away when the cops come. Flight by its very nature is someone not going about business. In fact, it's just the opposite, right? It's reasonable to suspect there's something wrong. And the cop can go in, the officer can go in for their protective and do a pat down. Limits here, again, this is a famous case, Minnesota versus Dickinson. Here they're supposed to be conducting a Terry stop and frisk. Looking for weapons for safety. However, the officer felt that a lump would believe to be crack cocaine out of the defendant's pockets, and it turns out it had to be excluded because that's not what the frisk is for. So you got to know the boundaries of this as well. Can you use this, can the holding and Terry be justified using the schools of thought we've looked into? And so that's something also we're going to be doing as we move forward in this class is some of the questions going forward on exams will ask you to apply the codes of ethics. Some will ask you to apply the main theories we've looked at here. What would utilitarianism say about this? It would. It would to a degree, but it doesn't have guidance because we don't know what the consequence is. So if it came out and it was, good, then yes, it would support it. But again, you can't know that ahead of time. So it's not really help because we can't figure it out. We need to know ahead of time when this is. Formalism. Would it be a good universal rule? To ask himself, for instance, where the law's application is clear. So that's what you got to ask yourself. Would this be good? Would it be a good universal rule to stop someone in these cases? Again, the famous sort of scenario there around Terry was it looked like people were casing a place to rob. Right, they're going back and forth, they're checking in the windows. So in that, yes, it would be to stop and frisk them because it looks like normal people don't do that. This isn't just window shopping. This seems much more like someone. Doing something that is not normal and likely criminal there. Virtue ethics is again, would this be prudent under the circumstances? Likely, yes. Would it be prudent to protect people's safety, your own safety if you're the officer? Yes. So these two really more than utilitarianism can speak to this. But it would be, it's obviously, when we say we want them to think about this, it's not that, run through the whole thing like I just did. That's hard, obviously, because there's a lot in the heat of the moment they got to be worrying about. But the problem is training scenarios in this will become second nature. That's the point of the training, right? That's when you have training, you don't have to necessarily think. You just follow your training, that sort of thing. You heard this. Placing in custody, arrest, seizure. Again, you can go through more of these. Legal rules alone aren't enough. Why? Because, again, you can't account for everything. There's often exceptions to just about every rule. And again, but we do need at least probable cause, because then it would just imagine, police can be harassing. We know that. Not all of them, but we know that happens. Some people are harassed in the sense they're profiled. Others are harassed for various reasons. Some good, some bad. Right? Some it's people using their power for themselves, that sort of thing. Maybe going against people they didn't like. But just think about that. If a police could harass one person, imagine all of them doing it to everybody. Just how difficult life would be in many ways. Again, here's the Fourth Amendment. Defining probable cause. You can see this. It's a lower standard than reasonable doubt, but higher than reasonable suspicion. Reasonable doubt, beyond a reasonable doubt, is what's required for a criminal conviction. Right? Reasonable doubt is it's almost certain. It is higher than reasonable suspicion. That's just probable cause is different. That is, you have really good belief that it's going to happen, right? Essentially, based on the totality of the circumstances. It's where all these facts and circumstances and the knowledge of the officer, reasonable, trustworthy information to warrant to do this, right? To go and just seize the person or search them, stop them, that sort of thing. Here's some more defining what seizure is. Again, modern technology. This is interesting because usually we think of searches as someone coming into the place and actually tearing the part, rooting through it. But this shows that there can be other ways, right? So essentially a search here, this is what the Kylo case says, is this the infrared scan of a home to discover where there's a narcotics grow operation? Is this a warrantless search? Yes, because this is, they're using a tool to peer into your house, right? This is not something, you don't have x-ray vision, but this essentially gives you. So that is a search. Because imagine that rule from, look at this through formalism or even just policy. Would it be okay for the government to completely spy on you at all times? Which, maybe they may do. Maybe the NSA is listening now. But we don't want that. And that's why it's a big issue, a big deal when it comes up. And giving them this ability to look into your home using technology would seem unfair to us. This is unconstitutional again. And this is an interesting one if you see in page 78 as well. Actually, we'll start this in the next video here. All right, we'll be back in a second with lecture video 2. Thank you.